heading the feature video team at Univision News Digital's headquarters in Miami. She'll tell you more about it. We're moving our way through the program quickly, and she's got a lot to say, so I don't want to take any of her time. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. So my name is Almudena, and so as Brent was saying, I head the feature visuals team at Univision News Digital, and I'll tell you a little bit about what we've been doing and experimenting with lately. First of all, a little introduction. Probably everybody knows what's Univision. It's a broadcast television station in the United States. We broadcast in Spanish. It's one of the two big TV stations in Spanish. The only really competition is Telemundo from NBC. So that means that our audience is a little bit different than maybe CNN or ABC's audience, in that our audience is more informationally starved, since they can't get certain news in Spanish in other outlets. Of course, there's newspapers and outlets from their countries of origin, like Latin America, but US-centric news for issues that matter to them. That actually means, and this surprised me when I came to work to Univision 2.5 years ago, that in an age of fake news, our audience has a huge trust on the network and on the anchors and on the reporters. So basically what Jorge Ramos and Maria Elena Salinas, the main anchors, say is gospel. And that is still shocking to me. Then at the same time, talking about our audience in TV and digital, we, as many other news outlets, are trying to understand how audiences are changing. And I think that's a little bit different for us too, in that we have the traditional audience for broadcast, which is basically first-generation immigrants. Very often they don't speak English, even though they might have been in the US for many years. They watch the newscast in the evening and are as well connected with anchors and the broadcast programming through their mobile phones. Now, especially on digital, we're seeing an increase of consumption from other types of audiences, which basically, reflects the shifting demographics in the United States. So we are trying to reach and are reaching second generation, third generation immigrants, which actually the language they speak the best is not Spanish anymore, is English. That means they still speak Spanish because they've spoken it at home for their whole life, but they feel more comfortable in English. So that specific audience comes to Univision, imagine broadcast and digital, for specific news that maybe they are not getting in the regular CNN, ABCs, the New York Times, etc., which might be issues that we cover, quotation mark, better or more than English-speaking outlets. So that might be, for example, if somebody is from Puerto Rico and we've had like crazy coverage in Puerto Rico in certain ways or aspects that other outlets haven't, or if you're a second-generation immigrant but your father or your mother is an undocumented immigrant, you might be looking at getting certain news with us because we offer more information. Or imagine if you have a friend who is a dreamer, is a DACA recipient, you're a US citizen, you were born here, but we basically cover these issues in more depth. And then also, especially in digital, since we do more things in both languages, we're trying to reach a wider audience that are non-immigrants and just like US and international audiences, like any other news outlet. So for us, basically, different generations and different audiences means different storytelling, and this is what we spend a lot of time thinking about. How do we reach these different audiences where they are, and in what language do we reach them? That means, how do we get broadcast to mobile? How do we do projects that are only digital, only social? And especially, how do we do cross-platform projects? So that means working for all platforms and trying to get projects that way. So for us, our main language for our content is Spanish. We in digital are increasingly doing a lot of things in English. They might be specifically in English first, or they might be in Spanish translated into English, or more often than not, in both languages. Resources are scarce, so we're always having those conversations of like, what's worth putting in what language. And then I've also added a third language, which is universal, and that's, I come from a photography background, so photography and images are a universal language, and we're trying to be conscious of that. Our audience, like CNN's yesterday talk, it's more than 80% on mobile. It's even larger, I think it's around 85% mobile. So these are some of our main, for example, Facebook accounts, Univision Noticias in Spanish, then we have Univision News in English, which in digital we have 2 full-time editors that basically do translation work and commission translations for content that we produce in Spanish, as well as commission and do original reporting in English. And then we have several verticals that are specific for topics like health and environment and whatnot. So now, this is interesting. We have an unlikely and very lucky alliance of mission and traffic in digital. Immigration is our number 1 issue that we cover. And it gets crazy traffic, and it's also very mission-oriented for us. Our audience wants that information, and especially since Trump's administration is in power, we see that increasingly so. So the other news that do really well with our audience is public service, so news that help me in my language, in Spanish in this case, news from my country of origin, this is Latin America, and then just general news, like I'm also a citizen in the United States, so don't just like put me on the last bin. So how do we've been thinking about how do we reach that shifting audience in mobile? And I wanted to talk a little bit about the dynamics in our newsroom, because I think it might be helpful for other newsrooms as well. We basically have a TV broadcast station that tries to do social video like in any other newsroom. And then about 3 years and a half, they started hiring more than 100+ digital reporters. I would be one of them. I had not worked at a TV station before. I come from newspapers and magazines. I used to be a print reporter, then turned photographer, then turned filmmaker. So what was really interesting to me when I came to work at Univision is that having come from the New York Times and Time, where basically video was the new thing and newspapers had to adapt to this other language and all of very old stuff by now, at Univision what I found is that there was also a cultural shift with video, and we all spoke video in a way, but very different languages within video. So we've had to do a lot of basically like unifying languages and trainings back and forth to be able to work well. So what we are gearing up towards, and what we've been doing this year especially, is trying to make the newsroom the more versatile possible. So TV reporters, of course, go on mobile and they're trying to learn how to diversify the language and the visual language that they do that in. And also digital and mobile reporters, in many cases, they're like writers, or we have like units specialized in data and investigation, infographics, different verticals specialized in different issues. They increasingly and currently go on TV all the time to share that expertise. So I wanted to share a few examples of experiments we've been doing. Last year, Univision launched a newscast. It's the first picture, Edición Digital. That's a newscast at noon every day. That's that's on TV, Univision.com, Facebook Live, YouTube, Periscope, and our native apps simultaneously. So people can watch on whatever platform they're in, and they hired different anchors, and things are a little bit more experimental that way, even though it's still fairly broadcast. Then we've done the second picture, for example, is a project that our digital infographics team worked for the election. It's a tool that people could play with and count votes to see how the election would turn out. And that in the picture is Enrique Acevedo, is one of our anchors. And basically what we did is we took that digital tool and in a touchscreen made Enrique Acevedo play with it on air. So that's another way that we've been trying to blend both worlds and different languages. This one, for example, is a recent video we did in Puerto Rico. It was filmed entirely on phones. It was about a funeral house that was a call center doing the aftermath. And that ended up on TV as well. And that fourth picture is a Facebook Live in Houston with Harvey that had a lot of engagement. Anyway, so that basically means, and I'll finish with the context soon, that anchors and broadcasters, like our very famous Jorge Ramos, write op-eds, are writers. They're trying to reimagine the visual language with which they do, from Facebook Lives to everything, including Snapchat, to also projects that are conceived as only digital end up in TV and vice versa, and partner with other news outlets in other languages. So this is an example of a story we did. One of our editors, environment editor, went to Mexico to cover an environment story, and when he was there, there was a huge snowstorm that affected and threatened the whole population of monarch butterflies. So he's a writer, he wrote an amazing story, and we sent with him a cinematographer and filmmaker who basically did a short documentary. So that, then back in the newsroom, we decided, okay, we were the only people there, we are the only people with these images in Spanish or English. So then we quickly translated and subtitled the video in English and put it on Univision News. Then we talked to the environment desk at The Guardian, and they also published it in English. And then about a couple weeks later, if I'm not wrong, or a week later, it showed up in one of the news magazines in Univision with their own hosts and reporters, and was on TV that way. So in our newsroom, basically, we've learned that collaboration is key. We've been doing trainings from TV crews to digital crews and vice versa. And we think this is really important because in a time of limited resources and limited budgets, the more if we get access to an amazing story, it doesn't matter if it's a cameraman from TV or filmmaker from digital. We want to make sure that we can get the footage in the different languages, visual languages, and I'll get more to that in a minute. We can come back to the newsroom with footage that is useful for all platforms. So package for TV can come out of it, the same as a short documentary, the same as a package with graphics that the Infographics team can work on. And this is, we've not published this yet. We're working on a big project right now about hurricane craziness. Everybody's on that, of course. And so this is one of the mock-ups for the beginning of an Instagram story we've been working on. But we've basically sent a crew to tour the whole Caribbean to track a lot of the locations that the Hurricane Irma went through, and now Maria, of course. And what we're doing is we're sending a digital crew of 3 people, writer, a social producer, and filmmaker and photographer, but they're producing content that will go on TV specials as well, and thinking about social and TV and digital in all platforms in one, and trying to film material that will be usable to have amazing coverage in all platforms. So something very basic, and again, these might be boring for some people, but visuals for mobile, some lessons learned, the power of good images is universal, and I am a big proponent of quality, and I think it's still king. Close-ups are everybody's friends. When we photo edit in any news outlet, we try to avoid wide shots, especially for mobile, because, I mean, we see things this small. So faces and emotion and close-ups are key. It's really not about the camera, it's about the eye. So you can be an amazing photographer or just any citizen with your phone. If you're there and you have the eye to capture and frame a good shot, and you can capture the moment, that's what matters. And it's really, I mean, we've done whole videos with phones that have broadcast on TV. And subtitles are a pain. They consume a lot of time to put, but they're necessary. I think increasingly so for our audience, they're key. We basically do them all the time now, but I think they will be key for other audiences as well. Now, distribution is key, it's not an afterthought. We've heard about that all the time. For us, for example, in Facebook at the beginning, when we did documentaries, we used to share like a trailer, and then what we saw was that people never watched the actual documentary, so we've been experimenting with sharing like moments and raw instances of that, and then that leads to better views and better like reaching the audience in the actual content. With YouTube and Vimeo, which we post a lot of our things on, we try to pay a lot of attention to thumb and title, and Instagram stories are very creative and are huge for our audience. So everybody has been hearing about the video hype, right? It's like newsrooms are firing writers, hiring video. Now, I'm a big proponent of not any type of video, and quality is really king. I'm a big proponent of maybe do a little bit less, but with more head and more talent and better visuals, and that will go farther than just having a gazillion people with their phones who don't know what they're doing. So video storytelling for mobile, it's in many ways good old visual storytelling, and some things that work for video stories, no matter the format, including mobile, are simple ideas and concepts. We did a video about hate speech online against undocumented immigrants. So we made a few dreamers record themselves reading on their phone hate messages that they had received that did really well. Visual evidence, this is not a video from Univision, but it's a good environmental example of threats to albatrosses, and you can see in a single image why you would want to see that rather than reading a text. The rare, the incredibly visual, we did a documentary that did really well on an alien festival in Argentina. Who knew? Action unfolding, drama, tension, surprise, change. These has been like that for many years. It's good principles for any documentary work. We did a bunch of work after the Orlando massacre and released documentaries a month afterwards and a year afterwards, following the changes and how PTSD basically manifested through the lives of 3 survivors. And then let's not forget about universal connections. That's like humor, tenderness, emotion. Those do really, really well in video, including mobile. I'll talk about these examples. It's one of my favorite videos that we did last year during the campaign. We basically tried to look for all around the country profiles of Latinos that were gonna vote different ways to show how the Latino vote was a little bit more heterogeneous than some people thought. This is one of the profiles we found. This one lady is from Mexico, also a US citizen. She is a doctor, and he is from New Mexico, American, and big NRA supporter and shooter of guns. And yes, they are still married.
Look, is there Anthony?
I can't help it. Okay, let me get video.
Here in this one.
Plenty.
We suppose that he's going to get the presidents to the United States. what he going to get with that. He said that he has.
Look at that green one over at the tree.
Yeah.
Hey, Donald Trump is taking a lot of heat right now because they said he's flip-flopping on the immigration.
What mean that? I don't know what mean
He's
that.
changing his mind.
So is this a business for him? Get the presidency of the United States is other
No.
business? The Islamic is a religion, and we need to respect the religions to the other.
Might
Tell
have
you
the
what to
Islamic
do.
State has declared war on the United States.
But you are a Christian, even you don't go to church.
Not all the time. Because you get mad when I go do things without you, that's why.
So now you're gonna think that I'm the bad influence, but you don't go to church.
Anyway, so this is a short documentary that we did for the web, part of this big project and this big series. But I think it illustrates how humor and tenderness, in a way, drive home certain points much more than any other language. So after we did this short documentary, this was weeks before the election, we decided to do an original video series exclusively for Facebook with these two characters. They are amazing by all parameters, and we found them that they could be really representative to discuss certain issues that were key to our audience, the Hispanic audience. So we did a series called Los Segura in the same humorous tone, and they basically, we asked them if they would want to do weekly sit-ups in which they recorded themselves with their phone. So nothing fancy, they would send us the video, and in which we worked with them to decide a topic to discuss each week. So we did the military, we did guns, we did healthcare, and it was fascinating. I'll just play a little bit of one of the episodes.
Now that you have your New Mexico concealed carry license,
So this
you
one
can now start carrying a handgun.
Can I bring it with me all the time like you?
Yeah?
Oh my gosh.
You use the sight.
I'm not sure if I want to do that.
Well, you said you didn't like somebody pointing a gun at you, so.
Anyway, so they go on, and it's about half an hour each video, but I'm going to talk a little bit about different formats and different languages that we use to reach our audience visually, in digital mostly, but also cross-platform. Photojournalism, photos are the entry point to our site and to any news site, and the reason why you click on certain article rather than other many times is the photo. So of course, hugely important still these days. What we've found for mobile, for example, with photo galleries is that vertical galleries work more precisely because of our patterns of swiping. We've been trying to experiment with conceptual photo essays. In this case, for example, for A Day Without Immigrants, there's these like farmers community about an hour south of Miami. So we went there and we basically tried to take photos of farmers' hands in a way, and documented people, as many of you will know, are very reluctant to show their faces for clear reasons. And so we tried to take photos of their hands and basically ask them what would those hands say if they could, especially now. We've been experimenting with interactive photos. These are just some examples from the Mexico earthquake. With special projects, I think I'm going to show a couple of them because I think they show well how cross-platform we're trying to use different storytelling tools. We do special projects that are digital, all in both languages. They're all in Spanish and English, and we design for mobile. So we actually don't look at designs for desktop until much later. This is one that we're working on right now. It's 4 chapters. We've released 3 of them, and we have one other 4th one coming up. It's about the Central American refugee crisis, very heavy topic. we open the whole project with a GIF, and then design-wise, I'm just going to talk about a few things. This project, for example, it's a long-form narrative project, so texts are many thousand words. We've called them books for a reason. And we have long-form writers who have written those texts. We've made those texts into audiobooks formats that you can listen on the same project or on your podcast provider. We've done all the photography. We have amazing photojournalism in the project. We have all the photography square for mobile. We have a lot of different types of video. We have video that is ambi, so you scroll down and basically a little ambi clip that's a little loop plays out, documentaries, animation, illustration, and design-wise, for example, so we've it's a long-form experience, again, so it will tell you this experience will take you to read 2 hours, will take you to listen, whatever. So every time you come in the project, it memorizes the position that you were in, so that's really useful. And yeah, this is an example of a little piece of an Instagram story that we did for the second chapter is on Costa Rica and how Costa Rica is handling the influx of Central American refugees. On the Costa Rica story, we had a special focus on transgender migrants. So again, Instagram stories for our audience work really well. Now, this is an example of something that we've done with this project that we're trying to do with other projects. These texts are in Spanish, but in English you would see the same. There are certain, the writer for this chapter, for example, is from El Salvador, and this project delves into gang violence and in a lot of depth. So there are a lot of words that if you're not from El Salvador, from Central America, you don't know what would mean. So you basically can click on the word and it tells you the definition, gang member, MS, you're from Mara Salvatrucha. So what we did with that visually was with Instagram stories, our social media team, we work with our social media team to basically convey that in video. So what do these words say to you? And then there are some of the words in the project that you might not know what they are. So clica, navarone, which is basically what they were to hide themselves, and then a little promo to the project. These are, different loops that we've used to promote the project. This is the beginning of one of the documentaries in the project. We have at least one documentary per chapter. Another project we did on the Colorado River, including infographics, and this is an example of a video for mobile, video for desktop, simple stuff. This is an investigation we did on the cruise industry, and design-wise, we thought a lot about how to navigate against chapters, and we have worked a lot with animation to tell stories that can't be told otherwise, so sources that have to be protected. In this case, it was a worker who can't use her hands anymore because of the abuse that she suffered while working as a waitress on a cruise ship. So we have recorded their testimony the same way that we would do, and then we have illustrators and animators that are bringing it to life. And we increasingly use illustration and animation in our storytelling. You might remember when the news broke out that a lot of immigrants died on the back of a truck in Texas trying to cross the border. So in this case, we use Coral Project to collect some of their stories, and then we illustrated and animated them. So that, in a way, for our audience is the only way we could tell it, because video in this case would be very different. We've used animation with humor. This is a video we published the night of the election. And I will tell a backstory.
When Mexico sends its people, they're not sending.
This is just some of the most famous Trump quotes. But we had prepared, this was prepared before the election night, and this is sort of like a parody of a funeral for Trump with his best quotes, whatever. Then, of course, that night everybody entered in panic, and we're like, what do we do with this content? How do we actually make any sense of it? So we tried to repurpose it that way. We do a lot of animation and illustration with public service work, and this is something that I would not have imagined we would be doing. These are videos for Facebook and Instagram that are tutorial-wise, very public service. What should I do if ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, comes pick me up? What should I do if they do a raid in my workplace? So basically it tells people what some of their rights are in a very dynamic way. And of course, good old explainers. We do them in both languages too. This was one for San Valentine's.
You start to feel a bit of everything.
What happens in my brain when I'm in love.
Happiness,
and these you see them in, of course, many other outlets. With social video and breaking, of course, we're doing Instagram stories that combine creative tools with reporters on camera, from digital going to TV and vice versa. We did in Puerto Rico an initiative recently trying to connect families. And those did really well on Twitter. With documentaries, more of the same. We're trying to have them reach as many audiences as possible. This is a documentary we did when the Cuban pitcher Jose Fernandez died. Huge for our audience. It's an hour documentary that we filmed in my team, in the digital team, that ended up broadcasting on primetime TV, our sports network, our news network, local network, TV, YouTube, Vimeo, live stream, and all of that. This is a little trailer. I don't think I'm gonna show it to you for the sake of time. And these are a few of the promos that we did for social. This is a little animation that was part of the documentary.
Como yo no pude ser.
The trainer talking about the pitcher, a little burst of him pitching.
Lanzar la bola para home play es un arte.
This was a promo for the sports
tiene la
broadcast.
inteligencia y el análisis del ajedrez.
And we do more documentaries, especially short documentaries, all the time, and try to have these conversations about how do we make them reach all platforms. With 360 video, I want to show a little bit of an example that we did.
Oye, vete para tu país.
El Donald Trump, ese es el anticristo.
They didn't let us say bye to him or anything, they just took him.
Venís aquí por necesidades, no es venís por gusto.
¿Qué va a pasar con nosotros?
I feel like I'm from here.
So this was a documentary series in 360 video about some of that profile some of the cases more in danger of deportation when Trump took power. We decided to do this series the day Trump was elected, and we published it the day of his inauguration in January. And although it was our first big project in 360, so there are a lot of things that I would improve now if I looked at it. One thing that I think did well is basically give you an empathy vehicle and a reason why to be immersed in the video. So for example, I'll use my favorite comment in YouTube of the video was somebody who in Spanish wrote, "Why does it feel like I'm in the video?" And that was a huge learning lesson for us because our audience, especially the more traditional audience, have not seen anything in 360 before. So we had to do a lot of explaining. And then again, with immigration, for example, this project, I think it made sense to do it in 360 and not in a regular video, because it's in a way now that these certain policies might have people really scared. What does it feel? We invite invite you to put yourself in the shoes of certain undocumented immigrants with certain legal cases that you might be watching out for. And then again, editorial intention is important in my opinion. We have limited resources, so we try to pick and choose well what medium to tell each story in. And of course, I'll skip this because I think the VR session yesterday was excellent at of course giving more context of the ethics and the language and how is it different, information overload. And this is not exactly from my team, it's from the Infographics team in digital. We collaborate often as well and do video infographics, but they've been doing amazing work visually, trying to reach the audience in ways that, that are extremely popular. These things have been doing really, really, really well on mobile. Simulation of the Trump wall, you write your zip code and it tells you how much of the eclipse you're gonna see, a little visual history of Scaramucci. When, for example, the hurricane went through Florida, the Infographics team worked on this infographic that showed you how light was how basically a hurricane was darkening the state. And more of the same with Harvey. Anyways, I'll take questions. I think I went over time a little bit or almost there. So if anybody has any questions or, yeah.
Could you go a little bit into like the ethical implications of it? I'm a student and we've talked about that in some of our classes, but I'd like to hear it from your perspective. You mean of 360 and VR? Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, so I mean, we can even go back a little bit there, but so the ethical implications are, of course, I mean, with our audience and the types of projects that we work on, for example, where we do a lot of things, like I said, with immigration, so ethics are a huge issue. Like, people have to understand that everything will be visible in the image, so privacy is huge in 360, for example. I'm giving an example with our audience and the type of content, but that's with any VR product. Privacy is and I think the #1 ethical issue. Yeah.
I just wanted to say, I mean, this is fantastic, and I love everything you've shown. I've been frantically taking photos because there's so much to learn from here. And I love the fact that you're doing more in English as well, and wonder, are you doing partnerships with other news organizations? Like, I guess where I'm going with this is awareness in English-speaking audiences about the issues that your target audience faces, I think could be hugely valuable to just opening eyes more to the issues facing this community, and distribution partnerships to get this content out to a broader English-speaking audience.
Yeah, totally. I mean, that's the main reason that we've been doing increasingly more things in English. One of them is, again, to reach these shifting audience, our second and third generation immigrants. But another one is honestly give our work some more visibility, right? Many times it's in Hispanic press, right? And other times it's in this particular political context. I do think that the type of news we cover and we focus on really, really, really well. We put way more resources on covering certain issues than other newsrooms. I think it's important that are accessible to other audiences as well. And yes, a lot of it we do through Univision News, which is our vertical in English, right, that we translate and do things specific for. But we've also been experimenting with partnerships, and we try to increasingly do more and more. I mentioned the one with The Guardian and environmental content. We've been talking and doing things with ProPublica, we try to take any opportunity really to give more leeway and more ways to spread out our content, our coverage, and think it's important. So I'm glad you find it useful too.
So how great is the demand for like Spanish speaking? Like what are you all looking for, more Spanish speaking or English speaking employees?
Oh, right, that's a good point. Yeah, so I'll speak for our digital team. I think for the broadcast team, purely broadcast team, it would be definitely Spanish, although, yeah. And for the digital team, I am honest, and we would like to hire more second and third generation immigrants, Latino millennials in the US, but we found it hard because we need them to speak perfect Spanish. So it's interesting, when I mentioned we did this huge hiring spree of 100+ digital folks, I'm one of them. A lot of them, my boss who did all the hiring brought a lot of people from abroad, from Latin America. And one of his main criticisms towards himself constructively is like, we need more second and third generation journalists. And we have several in the team and we are hiring more, but it's definitely an issue for us because we need people to be fully bilingual. You can't have anybody who doesn't write well in Spanish, and that is actually a challenge for us. But at the same time, an employee that doesn't speak English is not versatile in our team either. So that way it's like a little bit challenging to find employees for us.
All right, thank you, Almudena.
Thank you.